going to do now is just give you a little bit more information about what this regenerative approach might look like. And you notice I've called it Hosts for Life, because frankly, every one of you, even if you're not in the hotel and or restaurant business, you are a host. And this is exciting to me because hosts are people that really do care for other people, and we're just going to discuss it again. So it's that hosting capacity, that caring capacity, which I think will enable us to play a really significant role in the future. Because if the system is breaking down, then to put it in non-tourism language, it needs to heal. It needs to come back and become whole and healthy again. And that's connected with how we define success. I just want to talk one little extra about this notion of growth. Growth has three meanings. One of the meanings, and only one of three meanings, is to get bigger. So that's what we've been doing in tourism. We've been getting bigger. We have more visitors. Our politicians want us to bring more people next year than we had this year. It's just the natural way of doing things. But the second meaning of growth is actually to improve, to develop skills, to become more complex. And the third meaning of growth, which I think is really interesting, if you remind yourself that we're living systems, is it's to mature. Fortunately, those of us who well, I don't, my daughter's grown up, but those of you who have adolescent children are probably hoping for the day when they finally grow up, right? When they take responsibility for themselves and the places and the family, etc. That is what we're being asked to do as a species right now, is to grow up. We've had hundreds of years of being able to play on this planet and extract from it what we wanted, to have fun and enjoy this way of life. But now I think we're being asked to grow up and start to take more responsibility and to give back and to take care of what we've taken for granted. In simple terms, in terms of tourism redefining growth, I would like you to bear in mind the real target is creating net positive benefit to as many people as we can. This is very different than just creating a profit for ourselves or our destination. So that net benefit is the income, so grow the income, but it's minus the costs. And what we have not done in tourism adequately is count the costs. Secondly, it means distributing that net benefit more widely in a community, right down throughout the community. It's a bit like a forest. If you have a healthy forest, the water falls on the leaves, trickles down, the rich humus soil enables that water to filter right the way through the soil and benefit as many of the soil microbes as possible. If you don't have that green cover, as it were, it quickly becomes a desert and runs off and does very little benefit. I would argue if you can bear that metaphor in mind, you'll understand what I'm saying. So how do we distribute the benefit over time? So if you have this very sharp peak, maybe instead of growing the peak, we do need to push it out into the shoulder seasons. And you've now plenty of evidence that both Germans and Scandinavians would consider this place really attractive, even in January and February, I would argue. If you live in England, it just gets grey and wet the whole time. Okay, so there's a weather consideration. The other one is over space. So instead of, if you've got places like, I would imagine, Kotor, which are very, very busy in August, then how in August could you be spreading other people somewhere else? If you've got certain segments that just come always to the same place and don't stay very long, how do you complement them with other market segments? And thirdly, and that's what we're going to look at in the workshop, is how do we start to be more imaginative about the creative role that we can play in helping a community flourish. The other thing I would say is the beauty of regeneration, which is when you're working with nature and you're starting to think ecologically, everything comes down to place. Because every place on the planet, no matter how small or how large, is different to every other place. The light shines on Kotor area, I'm going to use that as an example, differently to anywhere else. The mountains are different to other mountains. The flora and fauna, the flowers, the ecosystem is fundamentally different. The history, which is fascinating, it is so rich. Okay, that's one of the wonderful, I didn't even fully appreciate how much history is here, is different to anywhere else. Let alone your culture, the way you celebrate life is different. So it's really focusing on how can we work with those distinctive features, the essence of the place and the people on who you are, in order to attract a different kind of customer that's looking for just that. And I would, at some point, if we can have a discussion with Ulf as to whether some of these customers are in fact looking for a much more intimate, interactive relationship with place. So they will be judging a place on how much there is to learn and see and do. The other thing about a lot of tourists, most people don't understand this, well, actually we do. Tourists hate other tourists because they get in the way of the picture. And nobody wants to admit to being a tourist, they only want to admit to being a traveler. So the minute you have too many congregating in one place at a time, you're beginning to have a problem. But this is what I want to, maybe you're thinking this is soft stuff, I don't know, but I think it's actually very powerful. The hospitality community is already in the revitalization, the regeneration business, if you like. This is your DNA. But sadly, our industrial model that's based on numbers and throughput and profit and margins has turned it in these relationships between the host and the guest into a commodity. How many times have you walked up to a front desk and the general manager is in the back looking at his spreadsheets and often doesn't even come out to welcome you? All right, so we've become very much a commodity-oriented business, when in actual fact the core of hospitality means to care and to pamper. We actually make people whole. We connect what was broken, what was separated. And I can say this personally because I run a little B&B in England. I'll give you the URL later and sell you some holidays next year. But seriously, what I experience is that our guests come on a Friday broken. They are stressed, they are tired, they want to chill out, and they leave after a weekend as happy, healthy, flourishing, smiling people. Isn't that an amazing business to be in? That's what we do. How do we make that the essence of our whole group of what we do? The word recreate means literally to recreate yourself. I mean, make yourself again. It's again the same idea. How can we work with our guests to enable them to experience something that our current lifestyle prevents us experiencing? And that's wonder and awe. The nature here is staggeringly beautiful. I'm sure many of the operated people here, like Bruce and so on, do this on a regular basis. But if you can think of that, what you're blessed with, the place you're blessed with, is something that so many people now don't experience. So all this means that we can contribute to the community health. But the other thing is we literally are in the connecting business. We connect strangers, we convene and host meetings. And the other distinguishing feature from any other economic activity is we can't move. If you do run a hotel or a B&B or a restaurant, you are rooted in place. So it is in your interest to see this place healthy and flourishing. You don't want it to be spoiled with over-tourism, for example. So I would argue that now that we are at the sector, the part of tourism that really can start to work with the community, because the community are the other hosts. They may not have a stake in the game financially, but they're the other hosts. So if we can't get bigger, and I would suggest the data itself shows that we cannot keep growing forever, I don't think the planet could handle 3 billion people traveling the way we've been traveling. We're going to have to align with the purpose of life itself. And life is very simple. It's that which creates the fertile conditions for life to thrive. Now, there was a guy called Howard Thurman says, what do people need? Well, don't ask what they need, but ask what makes them come alive. When do you feel most alive? When do you feel you're flourishing? Or think about your children. You know when they're doing well. You know if they come down to breakfast and they're off color and they're not flourishing. You don't even need to measure it. You can sense it. But that's what you want for your children. I've never heard anybody give me the answer, I want my children to be more sustainable. We want our children to flourish. We want them to thrive. So the real issue facing us all, tourism or not tourism, is one of health and wholeness and thriving. We have a planetary health issue right now. The planet is dying. We have most of our institutions are beginning to show real weakness and are in decline. We have a public health system, a problem, pandemic or no pandemic. Mental illness is is epidemic actually. Poor nutrition, major problem, because we've been killing our soils. So I'm going to ask you in this workshop to start to consider what thriving health and wholeness looks like. And this is where you can start to do some self-reflection, not necessarily this morning, but after this event. How does a person flourish? And it's usually when they're firing on all 4 cylinders, if you like. It's not just that they're fit and healthy, but their mind is active. They are engaged, they're learning, they're growing. But as importantly, they are capable of feeling. You've heard all about IQ and EQ. They're capable of relating to other people, so the heart is involved. And there's also a spiritual element here in terms of we've found meaning and purpose in our life, whatever that might be for each of us individually. And this maps really well with what we've learned about how people learn, how people interact. We have 4 methods. We sense, and that's why I say some of us can sense when our children are not flourishing. We don't need a thermometer. We can tell that they're off color. We've got our brains, we can think. And that's the part that dominates everything at the moment. Everything is rational, everything is cerebral, everything is intellectual. But we are also feeling beings and intuitive beings. So if you can map that now to a company, it applies just as much to the company. The company cannot succeed if it's in an unhealthy environment. If the environment is falling apart, that company does not have a future. If its work people, its human intelligence part, if you like, is not being nurtured and used and developed, it won't survive either. If everyone in the company is working at odds competitively with one another and is fighting over who gets the next promotion and has an attitude, that's not my job, I don't care. In other words, there isn't a cohesive culture, which is the heart bit, the feeling bit, a company won't survive in the long run either. And of course it needs to make money. Of course it needs to be financially prosperous and efficient and effective. But what we've tended to do is just focus on that corner of the circle. Now what I want you to do is imagine you're in the community or your community at home, but let's just use the Bay Area of Couture as an example. It also has these dimensions. It has a natural biosphere. The economists call it your natural capital. I hate that, but fair enough. They're getting the idea that there is a nature out there. There's social cultural capital. How well do the communities within the Bay work together? Do they even work together at all? Or do they see they are competing with each other? What is the knowledge base? How well informed are they? How well informed are they of the market opportunities? Or are they working on assumptions that are basically incorrect, false, that, this is all we can get from cruise ship visitors, for example, is $1 a day per person in tax revenue, when in fact there could be so much more that we could be doing and maybe need less cruise ships to arrive. That's just a simple example. And then finally, how stable, how resilient, how successful is it financially? Are we really generating the benefit? So if you follow me, what I'm doing here, all I'm trying to do is stimulate your thinking about what these net benefits might look like. in an area such as the one that we're thankfully beautifully enjoying at the moment,